Good morning from Zurich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's program, my guest today, Juliet Linley, is here, the journalist, ex-Vatican correspondent. Also, Gorana Grgic is also here as well. They're both going to have their views on the big stories for the week. But Juliet is closest at the mic. What are we going to be talking about? Are we talking football today, maybe?
We might have to just look at the pitiful performance of the Italian team yesterday against Switzerland. And then maybe just what are making the headlines in Italy and Switzerland in general.
Okay, very good. Juliet, you'll be with us, of course, for the whole program. We'll also get the latest updates from journalist and political analyst Alexandre Kouchner, and also the host of the Brûlé podcast, Adrien Garcia, ahead of today's election vote in France.
I am reporting live from Paris, where the atmosphere is ambivalent ahead of the election. And as we gear up for the Olympic Games, why should you come or stay in Paris for this grand event? Stay tuned for more insights.
That's Adrien Garcia there. Plus, Emily Rookwood, editor-in-chief of the Julius Baer Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report, will be with us with all of her views on this year's release. It's the 30th of June, 2024. Live from Zurich. No, yes, it is Zurich. Live from Zurich. It was London last week. It's Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning. Indeed, it is Zurich. It is Sunday, and it is sunny finally, because it's been absolutely shocking weather. I think, listeners, you've been hearing about this since, I don't know, going back to sort of the middle of April. Sun is out this morning, I think, for a few hours, though. Yesterday, the day started the same. Julia, I don't know, did you have to nail down all of your furniture on your very nice terrace? Because I know, and also
things were flying.
And I know that part of the family was mobilized up in Berlin for the football match, of course, between Italy and Switzerland last evening. But you weathered the storm.
We weathered the storm. Not so sure whether my husband and son are weathering the storm in the aftermath of the disastrous play of the Italian football team last night.
Indeed, but we'll come back to that in a second. Also, want to say good morning to Gorana Grgic as well. Of course, sort of still a newish voice around the table, senior researcher with, of course, the Swiss and Euro-Atlantic security team at ETH here in Zurich. Good morning.
Good morning, and lovely to be with you again.
Listen, we'll come back to weather as well, and maybe also what that means geopolitically. We've got a bevy of stories to get through today, and I just want to maybe warn our listeners in advance. We're going to, of course, be spending a lot of time on, of course, the French elections. The polls opened just a little over 2 hours ago. Of course, across France, we'll have two guests talking about that. Gorana, you've given us a number of stories, and I wonder if we should we get football out of the way first, because it's always a very good geopolitical topic. So, Juliet, as you said, family were up in Berlin last night. Yes. Of course, Switzerland was playing Italy, and they got, well, not thumped, but
beyond thumped. If you look at the Italian
2-0. What are the Italian headlines this morning?
I've got them all here. It's embarrassing. One of them literally just says, just F off to the team. That's just it. That's like
what newspaper was that?
The equivalent of.
Okay, what is the headline? How do you give us the headline in Italian?
Corriere Italia pezzi, Italy in pieces, beaten and humiliated as it crashes out of the Euros. Repubblica, little Italy is already back home, tiny Italy sort of thing. And then one of them, Libero, is just like pippe azzurre, which just means you guys are such a flop. Go and hoe, and that comes up bad. Just forget football. Take up farming.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, it was an extraordinary match, particularly at second half. I mean, what was 27 seconds in, and of course, Switzerland sort of sealed the deal. Were you watching last night? Because it was amazing also in Zurich, just the electricity of just like throwing open the doors, despite sort of this kind of being somewhat stormy at the same time, and just hearing the whole city and the whole country
smelling
erupt,
the barbecues everywhere. Everyone's getting together, right, Gorana?
Well, am I going to get my residence card revoked if I say that I didn't watch the game last night?
No, you won't get it revoked. Not yet.
But there are several layers to this, and I'm glad to hear the kind of responses now, because I've been sort of switched off, buried in some work anyway, moving houses and all that. But I have to say, as a Croatian, so there was a little bit of sense of schadenfreude because Croatia got kicked out because of the draw that we had with Italy. But we don't blame Italians, we blame the referee, actually. And that referee is also now out of Euro. But having heard this overview of the newspapers, I can't help but compare it to 21. I actually spent that year in Rome, and I was there for the victory, and I thought that Rome was going to burn down literally after they won. So it just shows me that Italians, as faithful as ever to the stereotype, when they love their team, they love it to bits, and equally, when it's losing, I think that they are willing to renounce it and sort of give up their citizenship upon any single loss. So it's football, I guess, and again, not to conform to gender stereotypes. I was doing something else.
Okay, well, listen, we've got England is playing Slovakia, and then we will see. Then it's going to become sort of real, it's going to become quite a London versus Zurich in our own company. Because, of course, if England gets through and beats Slovakia, then we will see, of course, what happens. It could be a Switzerland-England face-off. We will see. As I said, tons of things to get through. Why don't we jump to Washington and New York? If we look at some papers this morning, they are reporting there might be a special closed-door summit, family meeting, you could say, at Camp David today. There is, of course, much speculation as what this could mean, of course, for the future. For Biden, of course, topping the ticket for the Democrats. Grant, let's start with you because, this is it is a bit of a review program. It's a look-ahead program as well. Yeah, your take on what you see on the other side of the Atlantic at the moment.
That one I did watch, so not like football, but that's part of my job description. So at times, that debate was painful to watch. However, I would say that also there is this sort of penchant for kind of catastrophizing and to kind of see all the bad things that have happened with that kind of inflated sense of kind of urgency that Biden needs to get out. Because I think if you look at just the transcript of the debate, he was mostly-ish coherent, I would say. There were a couple of these stumbles that are now being replayed to that and being made into GIFs and memes and all that. But, compared to Trump, who was just producing a full statement after another, there is a huge contrast. However, obviously, these debates are a show, a performance, right? And the optics were definitely not good. And it's no wonder that Democrats have gone literally into what's been termed the DEFCON 1. And you rightly alluded to this idea that now the Biden sort of oligarchy needs to kind of come together, namely Dr. Jill Biden and President Biden's sister, who were there for him when he was deciding whether to run or not in 2020, and to perhaps have this sort of honest conversation. Whatever happens, I think if Democrats are going to move, they need to do it very fast. We are about 4 months away from the election. The Democratic National Convention, where the nominees need to be confirmed, is taking place in about a month and a half. And if they are serious about moving with someone else, then this needs to start happening very, very soon, because then the process of actually having the delegates switch from pledging that support to President Biden over to someone else, and then now, without wanting to open another can of worms, who that someone other would be. Is it Kamala Harris, or would it be, Gavin Newsom's of the world, Gretchen Whitmer's, and who else might be there in that kind of fantasy football, to keep with the metaphor of the morning, is still unclear to see. But I think that these couple of days will be crucial. And at the same time, I also want to urge us all to not focus on solely one debate performance, because President Biden went to one of these rallies. Sure, he had a teleprompter, but he was a different sort of person. And then that opens to me a question of, what it is that Americans want in a president. What do allies and partners want to have in a president? Because the presidency in the United States is highly personalized, but that office is a huge, huge bureaucracy. And of course, the president is a figurehead, but by no means the only person ultimately. So it's about the team as well, the bureaucracy, domestically, foreign policy-wise. We need to keep these things in mind as well.
Juliet, was it family viewing at home? Because it's interesting, if you look at the Wall Street Journal this morning, there's a very good story, which, and it's interesting, you sort of talk about the bureaucracy, Gorana. But this is a story which steps out the beltway of Washington, and it talks about actually how European leaders, and also the bureaucracies around European leaderships, whether we're in Paris, whether we're in Rome, whether we're in Berlin, how people have been, and certainly, administrators and advisors have also viewed the performance as well. So it's interesting to look at it from an international lens. So from the international lens, Juliet, of your perch, beyond your terrace, what did you make of it? And I think going back to the question of also, what does come next, or who comes next potentially?
That was a question. Who does come next? And I know that I'm a minority, but there was a great piece in the New York Times saying, give Kamala Harris a chance. And she'll certainly get all the female votes who are not going to want to vote for a Trump. And she'll, of course, also get possibly the ethnic vote. So that's not to be underestimated.
But you could say the brand of Kamala Harris is also not the strongest of this administration, certainly of the U.S. Incorporated at the moment as well. Yeah. So I'm just it's fine to maybe think about, okay, yes, you can rely on those constituencies, but is it enough? And I guess there's just the whole marketing of what's going to have to happen. As you said, Graham, there's 4 months to sort of make this thing happen and also build up a brand around these people.
But you can do a lot in 4 months, right? Look at what's going on in France so quickly before this election. We're going to move to that
in a matter of weeks as well. And you give us, of course, a very good segue, because I want to bring in Adrien Garcia, now becoming a frequent contributor to this program, also the host of the Bold Way podcast, a program that talks to creative leaders, not just in France, but around the world. He joins us from Paris this morning. Bonjour, Adrien.
Hello, Tyler. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. As I was saying at the start of the program, we're just, I guess 2 hours into the polls being open. If you look at Le Figaro, if you look at, all of the press, of course, we'll have a pretty solid view, probably about, a little less than 12 hours from now as to where things stand. But maybe what are you seeing, and how are things being observed from where you are in Paris this morning?
Sure. I've been voting this morning 2 hours ago, and it was already buzzing in the Paris city. The atmosphere here has been very strange over the last few days. On one end, there's a big buzz with very nice weather, the Olympics prep, la Fête de la Musique, the Fashion Week, the magazine launches, and all the usual end-of-the-year events. But on the other end, the shake-up of the French political scene causing lots of confusion, protests all over the media, social network, and in the street. So the city is buzzing, but you can feel the tension in the air. As Paris keeps becoming more attractive and dynamic every year, this political chaos and the early election are like a looming threat. Everyone's scared of extreme parties taking over, and what could it mean for social and economic life. So in the end, everyone is just holding their breath, hoping that it will not affect the French attractiveness.
And this is the curious thing, because we saw you, of course, earlier in the week at the opening of our new bureau in Paris. So how timely that we've set up shop there. But there's almost a tale of not just one or two or three Parises, but even many more. Because at the same time, as I was leaving our event at the République, there was a counter protest going on against the RN, which was not. I was surprised. It was not very big. I felt like there was more gendarmerie, more riot shields, and there actually were counter protests there, which was remarkable to see. But then the city was just alive. Everybody was out on the street having a drink, having a good time. Summer had arrived as well, so it's this curious dynamic right now, isn't it?
Definitely, this is exactly what I was meaning. This is very, very strange to be part of the city right now. In a way, when you are talking to the creative class here in Paris, it's been so quick, this dissolution decided by Emmanuel Macron, that everything is still happening. They're not gonna cancel the show, they're not gonna cancel the launches, so everybody is living like pretending nothing's happening. But at the other end, when you look at the media and you look at the social media, the tension is here, and this is very, very strange. So yeah, it's an interesting time. But unfortunately, we already know the results. The polls are very clear. So we are kind of afraid.
Just to tell us, we're in this moment as well where you get these proclamations of people from people, and of course you're covering the creative class as part of the program that you do. Is there this sort of sense of flight? Because I think one story that we've been certainly looking at and covering on Monocle, which is just the power of Paris creatively. It's always been there, but it's really sort of the supreme creative global hub now in many ways. Now you've heard from, of course, some families saying, "Oh, we're scared, we're going to leave, if it's going to be sort of, right-wing France or far right-wing France, this is not a place for us." Is that just sort of a lot of hysterical talk? Because I think, you look at some of these people thinking, okay, you work for one of the big luxury houses. Yes, you might have made a lot of money, but are you really going to leave? Where are you going to go?
Yeah, I heard that a lot. But where do you want to go? I mean, it's kind of the same in the US. It's kind of the same in Britain. Great Britain, sorry. So there's no really much way to go actually. And in Paris, if you are living in Paris, we are kind of preserved from this. The city is so rich and so eclectic, so electric. I mean, the business is in Paris, so I'm not sure that's going to change much in Paris. I think the way it's going to change the state of mind is very much in the other part of France, in the south of France, or in other poor city, poor area.
Just maybe distill it for us, Adrien. If you've not been following this story and you live in Singapore or you're in Kuala Lumpur or maybe you're listening in Mexico City, of course, this is a global news story. But just from, the man on the street, the man who makes a podcast, the man who is talking to people, in the design and fashion industries, why are we here? What has happened? Just tell it to us straight from your perspective. What is the national feeling, and whether that is, in the center of Paris, it's in the banlieue, it's in Marseille, or it's someone living in Lille. Why is the sentiment there, and why are we in a place, do you think, that also a lot of people who would have been pro-Macron, who would have been centrist, have now feel that they want to move a little bit further to the right? What's occurred?
Oh my goodness, this is a very complicated.
I know we only have a few minutes for you, but but I think this is the thing that many people struggle with outside of France, because of course, as you said, it's been this period of almost of course just the cult of Macron in many ways, but then we've sort of seen this unravel. You have this, and of course you're living it in France more than we are, but you see this man on the global stage. You see his prime minister in his early 30s. It sort of seems like this incredible A-team. And then we sort of course, find ourselves in this, because almost externally think, everything's been going well in France. You see one of the world's wealthiest families lives there.
Of course.
One of the world's most valuable companies, where this luxury boom is going on. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later with a guest from Julius Baer. So, but what's occurred just in your mind? And as I said, tell it as the layman from the 19FM.
Of course, I think this is very simple. There is two France, there is two worlds. There is the Macron, the Paris, the Parisian, the elite France, and there is the rest of France, and people in the rest of France are feeling quite disconnected. Quite disconnected from the rest from Paris. And Macron with his Macron with his political party En Marche just destroy the Republican left and the Republican right. So now the Republican right is moving far right, and the Republican left is working together with the far left. So it's a big mess when it comes to political party. But I think the first reason is this disconnection between Emmanuel Macron, the elite of Paris, and the rest of France, and this is the main problem, I guess.
Adrien, can I just ask you quickly? So here abroad, we're hearing a lot about this doom and gloom about the potential cohabitation that could take place. Can you just walk us through it? Like, how bad would that really be if Macron is then reduced to just being in charge of foreign affairs and defense, and Bardella is government, budget, domestic affairs, and everything? This is like the worst case scenario. How bad is that in your view, and how are people thinking about it?
And can I just add to that? Because I think one thing we're, of course, hearing, and this is, sort of an ongoing narrative, Jan, which is also, you might have, of course, the RN coming in, and with really not a lot of, experience in leadership, running a few municipalities, etc., and not great, and it was interesting. Gorana was talking about the word bureaucracy a little bit earlier. That there's just maybe not the bureaucratic might and experience to, of course, come in and take this huge role. And I'm wondering what is the sense of, and especially if we're in a cohabitation situation, what that will mean.
Oh my goodness. It might be a big mess. I'm sure President Macron will not stop working. I mean, he's gonna do his best to avoid any ideas from the RN to be implemented. But on the other side, the prime minister, the maybe prime minister will. I mean, that's gonna be a big mess, because I think there is gonna be a lot of protests in the streets, and I'm not sure the country will be able to be really managed, and I'm not sure the RN will be able to make that much things, and that might lead to another dissolution in 1 year.
I want to come back and maybe, and of course, end this half hour on a more positive note and talk about, again, a little bit the Olympics and the spirit of what's happening. But Gorana, just from your side, from a destabilization factor as well. I mean, you were looking at, of course, European politics with a capital P. And if I'm sitting in Brussels and if I'm looking, of course, the role that, of course, France plays economically, but also from a security perspective as well. How much concern is there? Or again, this is a nation of bureaucracy as well. Do many things continue to move forward at the same time?
Yeah, there are a couple of things here, and I think this is a great question in the sense that it evokes Brussels, because Brussels is what triggered it in the first place, right? The results of the European parliamentary elections. And I think that I would approach this from, first of all, Macron's calculation to actually call the snap elections, because this matters. One school of thought says this is about democratic respect. He respected the will of the people. They sent a signal, we need to call elections, right? There is a shift that we've seen across Europe towards right. There is the other sort of calculation, which is this kind of democratic hubris, where Macron thought, well, surely they can't get elected, right? People are going to counter-mobilize against RN, right? And we are going to somehow be able to, again, cobble up some sort of coalition that is going to act as that kind of firewall. But then there is the third calculation, and I think that I'm very persuaded in this idea where maybe there is a bit of even democratic contempt on part of Macron. And what I mean by this is that he might actually want this hard cohabitation. He wants to show that RN is not able to actually govern, that this is going to be a complete, what show over the next couple of years. And this, obviously, he can't run for re-election in 27, but then he can show that these guys are not serious, right? And that then that's one of the kind of arguments that we might actually have some sort of baby Macron, or at least not someone as far right or hard right come in 27. Now, whether this is a bet that is going to pay off in the end is a question, but undoubtedly, and here I see some of the sort of reverberation of the American politics, because we are again talking about presidential system where we have the government, the executive governed by one party, and then obviously legislature by another. And here we might have an issue moving forward, especially as you alluded to, France being one of these locomotives of the European Union with the Germans, and we know what's going on in Germany. So if these two are not holding, right, and I think that a lot of headlines are now showing that kind of that center cannot hold in European politics, it is potentially problematic for the broader EU politics. However, I would also say that we are talking about the European Union these days that is much more independent as an actor through the Commission than it has ever been. And actually, Macron, where he had some sort of input in the kind of makeup of this new Commission, it wasn't as huge as one would have thought. And so, on that front, maybe France in the coming years will have to do with some sort of role that hasn't been necessarily the kind of, the role that Macron envisaged for France when he was running for his first term, and when he was dreaming of this Jupiterian presidency and really being the leader of Europe. I don't think that anyone serious these days looks at him that way.
Adrien, just before we go, when I was heading out of Paris on Friday, the streets continue to be beautified. I could see that their hedges were being replaced. There was palm trees being put on bridges. The city is really being spruced up. Of course, we're exactly a month away. We'll be in the first Saturday of the games, one month from now. And again, this is that third parallel world, isn't it? So you've got cafe culture and commerce moves, and you've got tourists. From all over the world, and they're spending as well. My goodness, the Americans are out in force, Adrien. It was remarkable. And then you've got this whole Olympic thing happening as well. So I'm just wondering, as let's say friends, colleagues are going down the street right now, and you see the rings being put up, and you see the city being repainted, graffiti removed. It's becoming a more beautiful Paris again, you could say. Is that starting to have a positive impact on people? Or just everyone's leaving Paris and they're waiting for the world to move in, and they're not really bothered?
Of course. No, after years of construction and dust, Paris is shining like new. That's crazy. The city is safer, cleaner, and as the cherry on top, all the grumpy Parisians are going to flee the city. So no, this is very exciting, and to be honest, I am super excited, and all the people I met last week are very excited about what's going on in Paris. But once again, this is very a privileged world. People living in Paris, working in Paris for big company, big cities, or as freelancer. They are privileged people. So I'm not sure it's gonna infuse in the rest of French population. But in Paris, everybody's very excited, huh?
No, and it's this is the amazing thing, because I think I now get the sense that even 2 weeks ago people were kind of, it's like, I'm leaving, and it's so good that our company is sending us away, and we can spend our time down in Brittany, or we can be in the Côte d'Azur, etc. But I think now you also feel that, actually there are, extraordinary array of global leaders and of course corporate captains, and not to mention all the celebrities who will be coming to Paris as well. So I get this there's a small sort of frisson which is happening now, that maybe even the Parisians are a little bit excited, even though, as you said, the grumpy ones, might they're already going to be gone.
Exactly. No. Honestly, I think you should stay. If you're a Parisian, you should stay in Paris during the Olympic Games, because, as I mentioned, all the grumpy Parisians are gonna flee the city. But I have 3 personal recommendations. You should buy some ticket for the game. There is 1,000 left, and it's once in a lifetime opportunity to see the Olympics in Paris. So just go for it. I would recommend to start a diet, because you're gonna have a gastronomic journey like an amazing one. All the bakery, pastries, bistros, street food. Get ready to eat 10 delicious meals a day. This is what I'm gonna do, honestly, to be honest with you.
But wait, hold on. I'm going back to the diet, because I saw you came to our party on your bicycle. So have you already started the regime already?
Of course, I started the regime, and I didn't drink alcohol, and I didn't eat your beautiful petit four. So I'm starting to be on a diet now.
Good.
I'm getting ready.
And what's point 3? Tell us.
Get off the beaten path. Visit the other Paris. Go in the parks, go in the Arrêt d'Essai cinema. Look for the freshness of museum and galleries. That will be amazing during the Olympics. There's a lot of big exposition right now in Paris, and this is super exciting.
Adrien Garcia joining us, pardon me, in Paris this morning, of course, with a little bit of assessment, of course, as France heads to the polls, but also a few tips for us as well, and why we should be going to the games. Emma Nelson, back in London, you're going to be there. You are there 1 month from now, and Adrien's been talking about the French diet, which I think you're always on, or maybe not, I don't know, but also have you started to sort of consider wardrobe for radio? Of course, it's going to be quite steamy on the rooftop of our broadcasting perch in Paris.
Oh well, no, I haven't, but because I'm trying to get into half of the clothes so I can fit in for Adrien's diet. This is the whole thing. And Paris, you have to work hard to look good in Paris. It's wonderful. And what I would do is I completely concur with Adrien talking about when a city suddenly comes alive when the Olympic Games are here, because we had London in 2012 and everybody was really down on it, and then the minute it started we were all clamouring for tickets for the basketball and the boxing. It was absolutely crackers. So I completely agree with that, but I need to get some tips from Adrien, because I need to give up the petit four as well to fit into the outfits.
Indeed. Well, we're going to see if Adrian's also going to be around during the games because we have a lot of booking to do in terms of guests across 2 weeks. But Emma Nelson, give us the news headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Tyler. France votes today in a parliamentary election that could give the far right the most votes. 3 weeks after the President Emmanuel Macron called a snap election, the National Rally have been consistently ahead in opinion polls. The Ukrainian president has renewed his call for his country to be given more long-range weapons and air defences after a missile attack killed 7 people. North Korean officials have been seen wearing pins with a portrait of Kim Jong-un in public for the first time. The Vatican cricket team is en route to London for its 10th Light of Faith tour. And tension has broken out on the seafront of the English town of Skegness after a donkey owner has begun forcing children to be weighed before riding the animal on the beach. John Nuttall said children who appear to weigh over 38 kilos will need to step on the scales before their ride. He claimed some are just too big to ride a donkey. One critic argued it was completely unacceptable to weigh a child in public and then say they can't go on a ride. Back to you, Tyler, in Zurich.
Emma. I think this calls for all you need is one of those those beach sort of windbreaker shields that then you put the kid behind the windbreaker and then weigh them there.
No, I think
and then whack them on the donkey. What's the problem? I mean, listen. On one side of it, this is about cruelty to children potentially, but it's also about cruelty to animals. And we know which way the UK ultimately would go because this donkey would become a national poster child, a little bit like the cow that got run down the calf 2 weeks ago. So no one's voting on the side of the children. 1 or 2 parents might be upset about their tubby children, but anyway.
Or those children were in Paris before.
Yeah, exactly. Those kids were having too many macaroons and.
Well,
anyway.
we need to look at what Mr. Nuttall looks like as well, because I wouldn't put Mr. Nuttall on a donkey anywhere anytime soon either. Maybe you could get the kids to race the donkey as a fitness thing.
Or put a saddle on Mr. Nuttall. Anyway. Just while we have you, I'm sure you might be coming back a little bit later in the program. Are you excited, though? Do you sort of feel this excitement and energy? Are you looking forward to your broadcasting moment in Paris a month from now?
I'm phenomenally excited about it because I think we're just going to be in the thicket of it, aren't we? I mean, geographically, we're slap bang in the middle of town.
We are.
We're going to be on a roof, which is always wonderful in July, August time. And I'm doing the Olympics before I come to you. I'm doing the first football match in Nice. And we've got the marvellous standoff between Guinea and New Zealand. Who could have anticipated such a thrilling match? Wow. Jeez. We're going to the first football match in Nice.
Is this a family affair?
It is a family affair.
Because I didn't see this on any of our story lineups or anything that Emma was heading off to Nice for a football match.
I was holding it back for a major headline moment, but no, we're doing that. So what I'm looking forward to is looking at a little bit of France before we actually get to Paris, so we can get that feeling whether the rest of the hexagon actually cares. But by the time we get to the rooftop of Paris, I shall be full flora, and I'm going on Adrien's diet as well. It will be marvellous.
Okay, just have to canvass around the table. Emma, sorry, Juliet, what were you going to say?
I was just going to add in that I've figured out that the Vatican cricket team, Emma, has no West Indians, only players from Kerala, only priests from Kerala, so Indian. Not West Indian.
This is. I mean, are you surprised? But I was going to say, during your Vatican years, were there
how many West Indians?
Were there a lot of West Indians?
Priests milling about the Vatican.
Yeah, no, I mean, is there?
There is a tradition. I mean, there's a strong Catholic tradition in the West Indies.
Of course. I mean, were there a lot of? Are there Jamaican cardinals?
Gosh, no.
Maybe not at the moment.
Maybe not at the moment, but maybe a Trinidadian one soon to come.
Yeah.
And then, of course. No, Gorana was going to say something about the cricket team too.
No, I don't think she was. Don't put her on the spot. She's wearing white, so they're not cricket whites this morning. But
I'm not. I was just intrigued with the whole Paris rooftop studio, and I was thinking, is
there a gig for you there as well?
Well, is there an invitation?
Do we need some? We probably will need some political analysis for sure. I think we should carry on though with our political analysis as well, because of course we can't exhaust the story too much. But I want want to return to Paris. Alexandre Kouchner is joining us right now. Of course, a journalist and political analyst, of course, with with a variety of different titles and hats as well. Alexandre, we saw you just, of course, a few weeks ago, and there wasn't even sort of, too much sense of what was happening. That was 2 weeks ago. There wasn't sort of the heat around it as there is today. So we were talking to Adrien a little bit earlier. We have you this morning. What is your assessment as well? And again, just now we're 2 hours 40 minutes since the polls opened.
Well, my assessment is that I didn't know about the donkey debate, and now I feel like there are more pressing issues that we should discuss rather than the French elections. But if we're looking at the French elections, today is a momentous day. Whatever happens past 10 p.m. tonight, we're entering new territory for French politics, either constitutionally or politically, because there is a slight chance, it's not marginal, it does exist, that France might be having a far-right government in a week's time. And that is something that hasn't happened since the Vichy regime.
And of course, there's you depend on whose numbers you're looking at, and also the spin that goes along with this. What is this going to mean in real terms? Because we've been talking about a little bit earlier, as you heard, what this is going to mean from a bureaucracy point of view. But I'm also interested from a brand France point of view, because I think the one thing that I also have been hearing, and this is comments from readers and listeners, etc. as well, is that we're talking about the right, but it's this is also a bit of a grand coalition of forces as well. But you could also be listening to this elsewhere in the world and thinking that we're in AfD, Alternative for Deutschland territory. And I think there's many French who want to make the case this is not what's happening either. But I'm wondering what your assessment is.
Well, you're very right. It's many voters and, in fact, many members of the far-right RN party have been putting this narrative forward that they're not Nazis, they're not fascists, they're not AfD. In fact, they broke their relationship with AfD. But what this campaign, if you can call it that, because it's only been 2 weeks, has shown is that deep down, they're very much this still xenophobic party. And that's sort of their core. That's their main policy. It all revolves about xenophobia. So will France be a fascist country? No, not by any means. But because France is such a centralized country, because the president has so much power, and because this election could be sort of the launch pad to the 2027 presidential election, by no means is this just sort of a sign of the time. This is truly a shift for French politics, and you will feel it in the French national debate. And you've sort of it already started. You have members of the party, you have candidates who are now sort of plainly racist. It sort of opens up the doors to a discourse that you could not have had in public just maybe 2 years ago. So it does show that there is a shift towards the right in the national discourse. And again, having a far-right government party, even if it's a coalition government, is a momentous that you just can't really acknowledge by saying, well, that just sort of happens. This is really something important for just not France, but as you rightfully said in the program earlier, it has some deep European impacts. Imagine a Europe in which, power is divided between Giorgia Meloni, maybe Marine Le Pen in France, with a even higher AfD in Germany, not mentioning the other populist movements that are in Eastern Europe. You have a momentous shift in European politics as well.
I'm curious, just when we look at, and this is amazing, when you watch Jordan Bardella, of course, who could end up being, of course, PM in weeks' time, sort of a master showman, maybe not always great being challenged, but when he is on script and he's on message, and even I think when he's challenged and he knows where to go, it's an impressive performance. And particularly if you're watching this from other corners of the world, one interesting territory that here we're talking about a party which is right of center, and of course it can go to extremes, as you said, but fascinating also just the language and the rhetoric as well. well, and I'm wondering how much security is at the core of this, because, it was interesting listening to him the other day where he was saying, well, look at, we want to have a France where you can be safe if you're Jewish, if you're gay. And this is kind of remarkable that, of course, now we're in a position where, of course, you have many Jewish leaders who have also said, look at, when it comes down to security, also the pro-Palestinian tack that, of course, much of the left has taken, that they find themselves, of course, in RN territory. But I would imagine, though, that there's probably plenty of officials, about to be elected who probably don't have the most progressive views in the RN.
No, you're right. There has been, and this has been going on for more than 10 years now, really a cleanup of the far-right act, if you wish. They've dropped some very, very heavy anti-Semitic language. They've cleaned up their act. They're wearing ties at the parliament. So, yes, if you see Jordan Bardella on the screen, he is a very good candidate. He's extremely young. He's 28. He comes from Seine-Saint-Denis, a disenfranchised region in the outskirts of Paris. He graduated high school, but not even from a university. And he is very good on the screen. When he's on script, as you said, he's extremely good. When challenged during a debate, he crashed twice. But that doesn't matter because, as you rightfully said, the RN now has a discourse which is extremely on par with what the French people seem to be expecting. And what they want is very clear from the polls. The first concern is purchasing power. Inflation is rather high in France as well. They've seen their purchasing power decline and they're worried. They want to be able to buy things. They want prices to go down. The second is security. They want to feel safe again because security is, and you mentioned it earlier in the program, security is now really high. Murders are very low. We're actually doing much better than we were 5 years ago, but they feel unsafe. And the RN talks to that feeling of insecurity. And as you rightfully said, when it comes to the biggest markers of fear-mongering, which is anti-Semitic tropes and the street safety, if you wish, the RN is now very much on par with the rest of the population. They are, in fact, putting forward a narrative in which they protect the Jews and they protect the minorities. But the underlying argument in there, and this is where you go back to their xenophobic root, is that the source of the problems for the Jewish people or for the members of the LGBTQIA plus are Muslims. Muslims and or radical Muslims, in their opinions, are the biggest problem for France, and they vote to fight this and to protect the eternal France, or however they want to call it. So this is where it's interesting to actually look at the discourse. On paper, it looks great. After all, we want more freedom and we want more security. But if you look at the underlying arguments, what you're looking at is a deeply xenophobic and actually dividing discourse, which honestly is not exactly what we need right now.
Just before we go in 30 seconds or less, let's say RN gets through with a majority. Where do we go then with this next round?
Well, in the next round, what you're going to decide is actually the MPs. And what we're looking at right now is not exactly whether the RN can govern straight away. It seems unlikely, but who they can ally with to get to the threshold of 289 MPs, which is the absolute majority. And this is where it gets tricky. We're talking today, it's roughly 1047 in Paris. We have no clue where we're heading. Let's be honest. We're entering brand new territory. So, just stay tuned. Who knows? In 3 weeks, we might be a monarchy again.
We will be tuning in. Alexandre Kouchner, wonderful to talk to you. And I'm sure we'll be checking in very, very shortly, or at least within the next 24 hours. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday. Indeed, it's just 10:48 here. We just heard Alexandre talking about, of course, that whole notion of purchasing power and, of course, what that means. And it's a bit of a week of rankings and global lists coming out. And I'm very, very happy to say that Emily Rookwood is with us, editor-in-chief of the Julius Baer Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report. Just came out start of last week. A little bit in line also, we also, Emily, launched our annual quality of life rankings as well. we love a list. Tell us about good morning, by the way.
Good morning.
Tell us about your rank. What is Julius Baer looking to set out to do? Because, of course, The Economist has a list, Mercer has a list, and we'll talk about your city rankings right now. What are you setting out to do versus others?
Of course. So, yes, as you said, it really is index season at the moment this summer. But what the Julius Baer Wealth and Lifestyle Report does that is slightly more niche than the others is it really just examines the cost of living and the change in cost of living and consumption patterns for affluent customers, and it's really very much this particular niche that we're focusing on.
So it's interesting when you look back, coming out of the pandemic, 2021 and across 22, and just how things have sort of amped up, but also changed as well. I mean, where we stand in 2024. So it's interesting. Shanghai was at the number one position in 21, in 22. Singapore, they did a bit of a swap in that position. And here we are back with Singapore this year as well. If you could sort of break it down to sort of, three key elements that have obviously brought about the shifts, because also there's enough upheaval, some new entrants, some dropped out as well in the mix. What are you seeing? So, I mean, obviously there is a constant fight and a jumble within these areas. But what we see is the top of the ranking has stayed fairly consistent. So we have Singapore again for the second year running. But what is interesting is that in the previous years, we've seen the Asia Pacific region as a whole coming out as the top most expensive region. And for the first time this year, that's now dropped down and it has been replaced by Europe, the Middle East and Africa, which for many is a surprise. And we also see London, they're jumping up into third place on the podium, which after all of the turmoil with Brexit might not be the most expected move. But what really underlines a lot of these changes is currency. So, for us, this is an index. We have to compare apples and apples. We're looking at a basket of 20 goods and services that affluent customers buy and use. But we can't compare those in local currency terms. So we have to convert everything into US dollars. Now, therefore, the relative strengths and conversely weaknesses of currencies plays a huge role. And what we're seeing is the currencies across the European region in particular are really strong against the dollar. The euro's done really well. Even the pound has recovered from its doldrum positions of 2022. And the Swiss franc. Of course, we're all here in Zurich. We know that the Swiss franc is a particularly strong currency. It was the top performing G10 currency of 2023. And that obviously has a huge impact on where these cities sit in the rankings. It's interesting also anecdotally as well. The things we hear across the year, our colleagues are traveling and they come back from wherever. And it is interesting to, of course, see New York there. And New York is the only North American city on the list. Los Angeles doesn't get a look in. We don't see a Toronto or a Vancouver. Vancouver is there in the top. I'm just looking. No, but at the bottom. I'm only dealing in top tens. Fair enough. So just to give everyone the 2024 ranking, it's Singapore, it's Hong Kong, it's London, it's Shanghai. Then we go Monaco, Zurich, New York, Paris, Sao Paulo. And Milan. But that's the curious thing. A lot of, as I said, you hear people come back, oh my God, it's like so expensive in New York and bad value for money, et cetera. And I'm wondering if value for money is also a metric as well, because it is amazing when you look at these places as well, thinking, what are those top 20 things? Well, actually, maybe tell us. what you don't have to go through all 20. What are some of the main things we look at, sort of purchasing things that end up in that basket? So we split it between goods and services. So it's luxury handbags, men's suits, shoes, champagne, but also then fine dining, hotels, business class flights, luxury residential property, as well as a host of other services, legal fees, for example, to truly try and balance out what people are buying and using. And although, yes, goods, they're expensive, we see that, and people are spending a lot of money on goods, what we really see this year is that there's the focus on services. And this is where the spending is. And obviously, spending when you're traveling around, it's hugely varied depending on what currency you're coming from or what currency you're going to. That obviously has a huge impact on how expensive things feel to you. And I'm curious then how much, let's say, data is also then driven by let's say, visiting these cities, and of course, we're talking about an audience which, where there's multiple residences, and people, of course, are spending, even prolonged time in hotels, and very much, being part of the service experience economy right now. So if I look at London, for example, you talk to, of course, many hoteliers, many restaurant owners. It used to be sort of the season of like the Gulf spend, people coming from the Middle East. It was sort of mid-July, and it would sort of taper out in September. Now it's year-round, and if you're around Berkeley Square, as I was last week, it's incredible. It feels like it feels like a little snapshot of Kuwait and Bahrain, and even when you look at the license plates on the cars as well, it's remarkable. So I wonder, how much does that also then drive a big component of this, at least for some cities anyway?
Yeah, so of course, when we're putting together this information, it's not just the basket of goods and services. That is really the what, the simple what, but we need a little bit more of the why. So 3 years ago, we added in this lifestyle survey where we talk to affluent individuals across the world, so they have bankable assets of over 1 million USD. Now, what we really do there is we find out their sentiments and what it is they're looking for, how they're consuming differently to previous years. And this need to travel is huge. It's one of the top stories that we've seen come out of the survey this year. And obviously a little bit of that, we feel, is a reaction to the pandemic. So before, we saw everybody wanting to buy goods online because that's what was available. That's what you could do from the comfort of your sofa. But now that the world is more mobile again, wealth is more mobile, families are spread out, people are traveling and they want to enjoy themselves and experience things. So it's this sort of experiential travel and enjoyment. So people are out on the street, they're in restaurants, they're doing things that they couldn't do when they were stuck at home in the pandemic. And that's really one of the top trends that we've seen here from the survey results.
Gorana, I just wanted to bring you in because it's interesting looking at this list. I wouldn't go for every one of them, but I do see that security does play a role in this. If you think about, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, question mark, because I think we also hear about a lot of people leaving London, those who live there for security reasons. Shanghai, of course, no security problem. Monaco, no security problem. Zurich, fine. New York, question mark, of course, for sure. Paris, iffy. Sao Paulo, iffy. I think Milan, we're all pretty safe. And I'm wondering, is that a component? I think also when you look at also people's, where they're going to deploy not just their spending power, but also where they want to have their experiences.
I would say there's no doubt about that these days, increasingly, we are seeing people who have the ability to vote with their feet. And I think it is interesting. Shanghai is there because it's one of these global metropolises. But I think in terms of China and sort of the upper echelons there, where they might be going ultimately, that's a big sort of debate these days, at least, especially China facing some of these economic headwinds. But I was very intrigued, Emily, with some of what you were saying, this sort of idea of services-driven increases, because I think in a lot of these places, I think labor shortage is one of the issues, at least on that kind of getting very skilled labor force. And at the same time, I think I'm following the European debates most closely. This is intimately tied to immigration as well. And the fact that we are as a continent growing older, and yet again, we are discussing some of these things in terms of the politics, and even in the context of French election, the anti-immigration sentiment, right, the kind of nativism that collides with that. And I would just be interested in hearing your quick thoughts on that.
It has to be very quick because we've got less than 2 minutes.
I was going to say that's a very complex question. Obviously, you need people to provide services, and there is a shortage, but hopefully this is driving. We see that there is a need for this and we need to fill the need. So hopefully that is giving people the opportunity to fill these positions, to encourage it in that way. So when it comes to the details of immigration and policy, I am not your lady, so I will steer clear of that. But I really hope that it does cause this boost, because we see that the economies are driven by consumption. And if the focus here is on services, then that's where we need to be focusing our attention.
And just very quickly, Middle East, because I talked about the top 10, yes. But obviously it's a region, of course, which is on the move. What is sort of the major players that are maybe at the next, from 11 down to 20?
So if we're talking about the Middle East, Dubai is obviously one of the places that we look at. It's a major international hub and a huge hub for the global affluent. And Dubai actually fell out of the top 10 this year. But that doesn't mean that it is down and out by any means. And it's really a huge centre of wealth. And we're seeing that it is increasing, and it's increasingly important. And actually for those people in Dubai, this is not necessarily a bad thing that their wonderful city is becoming more affordable.
Indeed. Emily Rookwood from Julius Baer, thank you very, very much. Also, Gorana, Grgic, wonderful seeing you. Juliet, Linley, also you're filling your shopping basket with luxury goods, I can see over there. Emma Nelson back in London, also our producers today, Mariella Bevan and Emma Nelson, also studio manager here today in Zurich with Carlos Silberschmidt. Great having him back around. Also Mariella back in London as well. I'm Tyler Brûlé. Next week, joining you from Südtirol. We'll see you then. Goodbye.